DMX stands for multiplexing data transmission. It is the protocol used to control lighting equipment. Let's say we've got one light with one dimmer function. This function lets us control its brightness from 0 to 100%. Let's say the light is connected to a line and we can pass different numerical values to the light through that line with a control device. This light interprets the number 255 as full intensity and the number 0 as off. In part 5 of this series, I'll talk about how this control by numbers is useful. But let's keep going with our example. So let's say we've got 3 more of the same lights in the same controller. First, we must connect them in series. We still want to send values that will control brightness, but we want to control each light separately. So we give each light an address. Then we put a number between 0 and 255 in a package, and we give that package an address. Then the controller will send that package out to each light in the series. If that address matches the address on one of the lights, the package will be delivered to that light and its brightness will be adjusted according to the value in the package. The value between 0 and 255. In reality, any given light will have more than one function. Each additional function will require its own unique address so that it can control that function independently. One single DMX cable can carry packages to 512 addresses. We say that a single DMX cable has 512 channels of control. All 512 channels create a network called a DMX universe. Large control desks or operator consoles that you might see at a concert have the ability to control multiple universes. There's DMX software that also has the ability to control multiple universes.
Welcome to the showcase. This is where I interview entertainers and other specialists in the field of entertainment, because I believe people like to know about entertainers and specialists and how they achieve their success. I'd like to ask you to please watch to the end, leave a comment, click the thumbs up and subscribe for more great content, because we can't do these podcasts without you. And I'm sure that when we introduce our next guest, that any comments that you want to leave, I'm sure Jacob will be highly delighted. Now, next, I'm going to introduce a guy who's a lighting technician. That sounds really flashy. We haven't had a lighting technician, and you've requested things like this. So I'm really honoured to welcome Jacob Weston.
Hello.
Jacob's originally from Hull, likewise from me. I'm from Heddon. Where else are you from, Jacob? In Hull?
I'm from Willoughby.
You're the posh area. Okay, so Jacob, would you like to tell the viewers, because you're a young lad, when you got started and what made you start in this kind of specialist field?
Yeah, so originally I used to perform. I went to St Mary's College in Hull. I was a member of NAPA, Richard Green Academy. I used to perform quite a lot. And then sort of around secondary school age, went to St Mary's College. I sort of fell in love with the other side of performing, all the technical side of it. So yeah, from around the age of 13, 14, I was, constantly doing things on computers, learning about lights and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I used to spend my dinner breaks sitting in the school theatre, learning the lighting desk and learning the sound desk, learning all that sort of stuff, just teaching myself.
And in those kind of places, Jacob, the lighting desks are very sophisticated. Some of them are digital and very highly complex and complicated, but they do wonderful things, don't they?
Yeah, they can do, anything that you want them to do. You can sort of quite easily tell it, you want it to do sort of a spin, and changing colour. And it's once you know how, it's kind of easy,
Okay. Well, I'm 65 and retired. I've been all over the world. I've had loads of lights, but I've never been a fan of DMX because I just don't understand it, and I've never really taken the time to understand it. And I think nowadays the complex lighting that there is out there that's very affordable has some very easy to use DMX controllers. Yeah. So let's take, for example, Jacob, a solo act or a duo or something like that, and they carry their own lights. Is it easy to set it up DMX into your show? Is it time consuming, or would you not bother and just have them all flashing?
I think there's certain acts, certain, things that would really benefit from a sort of more easy, but, more sophisticated setup, in terms of like lighting and stuff. And you can get these little sort of controllers that you can set. You can tap a button and it'll set it to the beat of the song. You can get them all where they all link together and you can plug it into your laptop and it'll actually, based on your tempo of your song and the sort of style of the song, it will do the lights for you.
Are they kind of like a sophisticated piece of software?
Not really. It's pretty plug and play. As long as you've got the troubleshooting fundamentals of how to find a dodgy cable, or maybe one of your fixtures hasn't got any power, because that's the main thing that I find people struggle with is troubleshooting. Once it's plug and play, and you get it all working, it's the software side of it is pretty self-intuitive.
The problem is nowadays everybody's robust. Everybody's in a hustle and bustle to get to the gig and get home. They throw the cables in the box and, there's no cable management. And next time they go to the gig, the DMX cable don't work. Things like this, it affects the whole process, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So is DMX becoming more affordable? Is DMX becoming easier to use?
So the DMX protocol, which uses, those 5-pin XLR connectors,
yes,
that's sort of more and more now becoming old school.
Oh.
Yeah, things are now starting to go down the route of SACN, which is a network-based protocol. So it sort of uses, the Ethernet cables that you've got probably plugged in at your home into the back of your router and all that sort of stuff. So SACN, which can carry, sort of one DMX cable, one 5-pin XLR can only carry up to 512 parameters channels. But on SACN, through an Ethernet cable, you can carry multiple universes, multiple things. So the more and more lights are starting to come with SACN built in, and it's becoming quite a I think it's going to sort of keep on going with SACN. So DMX is sort of getting easier to understand, but it's also, sort of getting drowned out.
Now, we also know that recently wireless DMX, would you say it's reliable or not?
Yes, I think it is. The show that I'm on currently, we use quite a lot of wireless DMX stuff. So for instance, we've got 5 wireless tables. They've all got 12-volt batteries mounted underneath and a little wireless DMX controller built in, which is called a Show Baby. Now, the Show Babies still have that 5-pin XLR output to go to your fixture, but yeah, the actual DMX part signal is taken from a transmitter, which is at the desk, and that goes to a receiver wirelessly to where the fixture is. And, they've been very reliable. Some of these stages that we go to, some of these theatres are absolutely huge. And the receivers over here and the transmitters over, 50, 60 meters away. So the signal strength is probably not an issue. And the protocol, it doesn't get any sort of interference with any of it. It's on its own sort of bandwidth. It's not very likely that it would get interference from, a mobile phone or some Bluetooth device.
And no delays, Jacob? Any delays?
No. Some of our cues in the show have got 0-second snaps. So, instantly, as soon as we press that button on the desk, which is 100 meters away, the lights will come on, no sort of delay. It's sort of limited by the components. That how quickly that battery can discharge its.
There's lots and lots of power bars out nowadays. Not your specialist field because it's cheap and nasty, but it does the job for solo entertainers, duos, and tributes. Is there anything wrong with this kind of lighting? Power bars?
No, do you know what? I think power bars are a really good sort of, tool for performers, acts to have. They're sort of low, especially if they're on a tripod, they're sort of a small footprint with good output. And I think, those sort of, to get even light on an act in some of the venues, pubs, bars, that people perform, and it's quite difficult to make light look good in those sort of situations. but you don't need a lot to make to sort of bring a little bit more to an act, or to a band or whatever. You need a good bit of face lighting, which power bars are brilliant for. It's wide light.
Yeah, and they're all LED now, aren't they? Most are LED. I mean, I remember the Power 69s, the big cans, with the
Yeah.
carriage lights in them. There's none of that anymore, is there?
Some shows, some people still use that. I know a couple of shows and some venues that still have, sort of the big, like you're saying, the big Power 64s with the CP62 lamps in. Yeah, some people still use them.
They're just big and bulky and hard to carry around for a small entertainer. Do you know what? These power bars now, you get 4 on one side, 4 on another. Is it easy linking them together? Do you need cables, or can it be done wireless, or is that complicated?
Do you know what? It's Chevrolet. Chevrolet? No. Is that the...
Chevrolets.
Yeah. I was thinking of the car for some reason. But yeah, so they've brought out more and more of their own sort of wireless DMX, which is built into these power bars. So they've got, I think it's D-Live, which is their wireless DMX stuff. And that's now been all built into the structure of their power bars. So all that you have to do is set it up on one of them, sort of put what you want on the back with the little LCD display. And they sort of transmit and talk to each other, and they'll sync up and do sort of all the same stuff. So they've, there's more and more companies now coming out with this sort of, you don't need to have the light and then the wireless DMX. It's all sort of coming together quite cheaply as well. You can get probably no more than 200 quid. You can get sort of a good wireless power bar. So it's that sort of field of wireless plus sort of competitive pricing is great for sort of acts and bands and stuff, because it's becoming more and more of the thing.
What kind of power should people be looking for in terms of LED lights to use on stage for a solo or a duo?
Say that again, sorry.
What sort of power on the DMX? Because you go up in watts, don't you? Is it 250 watt, 10 watts?
Yeah, you can get all sorts. I think, depending on you, it really depends on the venue size. I mean, if you're, it depends on your distance away between the act. Would depend on how powerful of, the LED you would need. But, you don't need, probably for most places, it's like no more than 200 watts. You don't need sort of these big, because it's not only going to distract you as the performer, it's also going to be quite distracting for your audiences, if they're sort of moving around, and the last thing you want is to, sort of blind everybody. So you don't.
I remember years ago, Jacob, every man and his dog was using a strobe, and your strobe would come on, and you'd be dressed in white, and you'd be like looking like a robot. Is that still apparent nowadays? Is that still popular?
Strobe has a very sort of, I think, in terms of me and like the way that I would sort of do lighting design, strobe has got a place and a time. You don't sort of need to use it constantly. It sort of gets, if you use it too much, it sort of loses that effect that strobe is so good at doing, and the impact of having strobe. So I think people, it has been used too much, I think. I think if you're going to save it for maybe your last song, that sort of end chorus, that would be perfect time. But, you don't need to be using it every song.
And what about laser, Jacob? Because a lot of acts nowadays, you buy a power bar and it's built in. The lasers are built into the power bar, and you have a foot switch and you click it and you go through all the different channels. Do you think lasers are needed for an act, or do you just need a colour wash, an easy flood colour wash? Or you become like a disco, that you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I think, it depends on it depends on what you want your performance to be, Are you claiming, it's a visual extravaganza with, as part of your act? It's like that, you need to be thinking about that when you buy these sort of fixtures. Because lasers, they can be quite dangerous, and if you're going to use them, you need to know how to use them. You need to know the guidelines around using lasers. But yeah, I think lasers are a sort of niche market, and you need to sort of think about using them if you need to use them. But I don't think people
They are very powerful, Jacob. I mean, China now are producing, throwing lasers out at pennies,
Mm.
and they're very, very powerful. They'll cut through any room. But like you say, if you're sat in the audience, I'd be scared at a laser hitting my face, and quite rightly so.
Yeah, there's all sort of guidelines at the minute, especially within professional live events and professional theatre. It has to be so many meters above, the average person's head, and it has to be in a place where it can't reflect back and all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, I think they can be, if they're not set up properly, if they're in the not the wrong hands, but somebody that's not conscious about those sort of things, it can cause a lot of damage.
Do you think if a solo act, like let's say an Elvis Presley tribute act, do you think they need a lighting system on stage to enhance the show, or do you think what they're doing as an Elvis tribute will take over without the lights anyway?
Yeah, I think, again, it depends on the act, if that sort of talent is there, it's, the band or whatever, the tribute is able to carry and keep the audience entertained, then, it doesn't necessarily need a lighting rig, or, like some color washes or whatever. It just enhances the performance and will get the audience more involved, more enthusiastic, I think.
Yeah, I think it encourages you to dance as well. You got that flashing light, reminds you of a disco. What about smoke machines, Jacob? Are they finished now or illegal or what?
No, do you know what we use something a little bit different than at Smirk. We use what's called a haze machine,
Okay.
which is sort of a less dense than Smirk, but it hangs a lot better. But Smirk and Haze, I think, I absolutely love Smirk and Haze. I wouldn't personally do a show without Smirk or Haze.
Sorry, Jacob, I'm
right.
I'm interfering. I wanted to ask you, with the haze, does it create any problems on the carpet or on the dance floor in terms of slipping?
I think normally in a normal sort of circumstance, no, it wouldn't. It's all water based. There's no sort of odor. There's no sort of residue left. If it's improperly set up, you might get a bit of vapor coming out the end. So I would just keep the physical machine, keep that away from any sort of surfaces, carpets, and put a bit of rubber matting down to put on top of your haze, underneath your haze there. And, you'll eliminate sort of those spills or, those accidents that might happen. But it's all water-based now, you don't you want to stay away from the oil-based because they do smell and they do leave stains and stuff. So the water-based machines are just as good, and I wouldn't do a show without one.
Okay, well, professional advice there. Moving on to pyrotechnics. I personally don't think pyrotechnics are needed in pubs and clubs because A, they're a danger. B, I don't think they're cheap, are they?
No, do you know what? They can get pretty expensive depending on the machine and depending on the type of pyrotechnics that you've got. It can get pretty expensive. I would agree with you. I don't think, sort of pubs and clubs, these sort of smaller venues, I don't think it's needed. Yeah, it's just it's waiting for disaster, basically, I think.
Yeah, I kind of tend to agree. I've seen many things on YouTube where it set the club on fire, especially in Germany and places like that where they use it quite vividly. What other kind of equipment can people do to enhance their act in terms of lighting or things like that? Is there anything else?
So let me think. Foot pedals, foot pedals are becoming more and more a thing, and you can get sort of a foot pedal to do anything you want.
Wow.
You can get something which is called a MIDI controller pedal,
Yep.
which you can hook up to your laptop. You can hook up to your, guitar pedal or whatever. And you can get it to change the lights with the tap of your foot, So if you're playing guitar or, you're sort of holding a microphone and performing, you don't always want to be, and you ain't got that dedicated person to do the lighting, to do the sound, to turn up the reverb, do all that sort of stuff. You can get these foot pedals, which is, it keeps your hands free to perform, and the audience won't notice what you're doing if you, sort of putting your foot on a pedal. And they're a good way of sort of being able to be flexible, but not having to have that dedicated person.
Now you're into all the theatre stuff, the big stuff. Let's say a friend of mine has a a tribute band to Rod Stewart, and they're absolutely brilliant. And they go do theatres. Do you need a sound system? 99% of venues have a sound system and lighting, and you pay them. Or what happens? What's the
Yeah,
crack?
so if you're going to a sort of a local theatre, let's take Hull New Theatre, where I used to work at Hull New Theatre. So let's take that for an example. When we got some sort of external company in, there is a package dedicated to sort of external companies. You get the option to use our sound system, to use our lighting rigs, and the theatres will provide an operator and people to help you get all your gear set up and interlinked with the system. And I think that that sort of it depends, sort of in the long run. I think you would save money if you had your own gear. But that sort of gear to fill a sort of a big theatre like that would cost thousands. So I think renting the theatre's equipment is a good way of these speakers work in this venue. The people that are operating them use it time and time again. Any problems, they're the sort of best people to handle it. So when you go to a theatre like that, you're paying for the hire of the equipment and sort of expertise of the operator.
Which is fully understandable. I mean, if I was a tribute show, lighting and everything like that, because in a theatre, it's very difficult to set it all up. You look at Hull Theatre, most of it's on the wall on brackets, isn't it? So you couldn't go in and put your speakers on the wall. You'd have to stand them on the stage. Then, of course, you've got all the problems with feedback and, because theatres are set to a certain audience decibel levels and feedback levels. They're designed that way, aren't they?
Yeah, if you ever look at the next time you go to a sort of theatre, the way that the auditorium is shaped is on purpose. It's sort of you've got normally it's a proscenium theatre, so you've got this big sort of archway and the performers perform in the middle of it. But then if you sort of have a look around at the auditorium, you'll see that the walls might be curved and come together at the back.
Yeah.
That's to help. Normally, that's to help. If a performer wasn't wearing a microphone, the shape of the walls would help that voice reach the whole auditorium. It's the same with an orchestra. If an orchestra are performing, and they're not mic'd up, the shape of the walls in the auditorium are deliberately done like that to help increase acoustics.
Is it expensive to use the venue's light and sound?
It depends on which theatre you go to.
Okay.
But normally they'll have sort of a tiered bracket system where, you can have a tier 1 system, which will be maybe 3-4 speakers, 5 or 6 lights, which will, I don't know, probably about 200 quid, 300 quid to hire. Then you go up in prices. You get more for your buck, basically, in this sort of tiered system. But on a whole, no, the cost, the cost of hiring the venue would probably be more than the cost of the hiring. Some places give it for free as well when you hire the place. But yeah, I know Hull New Theatre, it's sort of a tiered system if you want all the flashing lights and stuff.
And a lot of things you've said that really make sense, Jacob, and I really appreciate what you're saying and coming on the show. Is there a specific shop or place where you would go buy your lighting from that has real specialist knowledge?
Yes, I have all, whenever I've helped sort of churches or, sort of theatres or, bands and stuff like that, I've always said use Gear for Music. They're a local, they're based in York, I think, but they're sort of, they're getting bigger and bigger. And I remember first using them when they sort of first came out. And they've got dedicated teams to each department. You can call them up and say, I'm looking, to buy some gear. You tell them exactly what you do, the sort of places that you'll go to, and they will know exactly what you need. You give them a budget, they'll find you something within that margin.
I mean, Gear for Music is all set up. They've got a PA room, a light room, a guitar room, so you can play the guitar while somebody else is blaring out on the PA, and it doesn't make any effect, does it? So I think it's a really good idea what they've done.
Gear for Music
is the place for me.
Yeah, it's they've sort of got it all set up, and if you say you need some equipment, they're also good at sourcing and finding that equipment and bringing it to the shop for you. Yeah, so if you want some sort of dedicated bit of kit for your gig or whatever, speak to them guys there because they're very good, and they'll also give you a demo. So if you're buying some new, sound equipment or whatever, and you're a bit unsure about how to set it up, They'll show you, they'll show you how to set it all up. They'll give you, sort of that professional knowledge of if you plug this into here. So they're really good at helping people understand the technology that they're buying.
It's great to know. So gear for music, fantastic. And of course, most of the people that I've interviewed on here so far, Jacob, are pub club entertainers and your tribute shows like that do the theatres. And I suppose what you've said today makes sense and it's constructive advice. Do you have anything that you would like to say to people with lighting or smoke? Anything?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe, so whenever I used to do shows and stuff, sort of my mentors always used to say to me, 9 times out of 10, little is always more, so you don't always need sort of everything going on at once. Sometimes one sort of spotlight, that sort of subtlety in lighting design sometimes speaks, more than 5 flashing lights,
I agree with you.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Keep that in mind.
Yeah, so small is beautiful. That's what we like. We've been talking to Jacob, and I really appreciate him coming on the showcase because I've thrown some questions at him unprepared, unscripted, and he's handled them all very well. So last words from you, Jacob. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all very much.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask Jacob if he's got any videos with his light shows in the theatres that we can have a look at, and that would be great. So on behalf of Jacob, on behalf of me at the showcase, please watch all the way through. Hope it's constructive advice for you. Remember, it's impartial. What Jacob says is from a professional point of view. If you disagree with him, then you disagree with him. You have the right. But I don't want I'd rather you not text Jacob and say I disagree with you with that. There's no need. So we'd just like to say a big thank you for Jacob's time today coming into the showcase, and he's given some great advice. So watch all the way through, like a comment, click the thumbs up. That allows us to give you better videos from specialists like Jacob. Thank you very much.